Hello everyone. This video will feature acrylic paint, painting an object from direct observation with acrylic paint. Now, first off, I chose for my object this funky lemon juicer thing that I got at Job Lot. And I chose it kind of because I love the color of it. And I was interested in the form of it, and I also like that it gives me a challenge with investigating the form of it while using a limited palette of greens. And I did have a bit of red on my palette as well to mix up my shadow colors because red's the complement of green. But I liked this object for that reason. Just this, I mean, it was actually a tough color to get. You can see that I didn't match it exactly. But I like that it was all sort of one color while I'm able to investigate the form, the light and shadow on it, the values, the highlights, and so forth. So digging around your kitchen is a great place to find an object to paint, a subject to paint. Even like fruits or vegetables are great subjects to start with. To investigate color, to investigate form. So, I mean, you can really do any object you like. You want it to be something that you're interested in, but probably keep it simple as simple as possible for this first painting. So I wouldn't attempt, if this is like your first painting or new to you, I wouldn't attempt choosing an object that has like writing on it, for example. I think that could be a bit too much of a challenge for a beginning painting. You'll also see that, just turn this a little bit, I've placed my object on white while I'm painting. That also helps to simplify. So again, do yourself a favor, simplify things. If you have your object sitting on a cluttered surface or even a shiny surface or a surface with texture or wood grain or something like that, now maybe that's your intent, you find that interesting and you want that to be in your painting, but if it's not, try to pare down your surface a little bit so that it's just more basic, more simple for yourself. So if it's not a white surface, if you find that boring, maybe it's a black surface. Maybe you find a kitchen towel that is a solid color, would be good. So something simple, something solid I would recommend. But whatever it is, you want to have it in front of you. You want to make sure that the object is placed on that color. Don't just make up a color for your background, because the surface that your object is sitting on will dictate the way you see some of the colors within your subject here. Okay, and also in the slide deck that I shared with you guys, there are many examples and many recommendations for different types of objects you could use for this first painting. So check that out if you're not really sure what to choose. Next up in the video, at the very beginning, you'll notice that I worked on a already toned surface. I had taped off the box, which, by the way, is optional. I just like to do that because it's satisfying to peel the tape up. But if you don't have good tape to do that, or you don't want to do that, you don't have to. But I squared off the box with tape, and then I laid in a really basic gray. It was like this, actually it was this color gray to start. And I have this issue with starting on a white paper. I find that makes things really difficult, especially when I'm laying in highlights and things. When you lay those in and it's competing with the white of the paper, it kind of looks like nothing. It's hard to make it look like a real 3D form against the white of the paper. So what I did was I looked at the color of my shadow underneath my object to start, and I made a neutral gray that resembled the shadow. And I laid that all over the paper first, and that's what I started with as a base. Further on in the video, you'll see when I get a big fat brush and I lay in this lighter color to indicate that it's sitting on white. And once I did that, I was able to just kind of work around this shape and use that same gray as my shadow color. So it is useful in the end. It's not like, why am I putting this gray down if I'm covering it all up? I do end up using it in the end for my shadow. I just end up painting a lighter color around it. But it helps me as I'm going to not have that blaring white of the paper competing with all my lighter values as I'm trying to render this form and make this thing take shape. What else did I want to say about that? So I just coated it in this neutral gray that was similar to my shadow color on my paper. And then, as I said, when I go in later, as you see, like a little less than halfway through the video maybe, you'll see me lay in this lighter color to indicate that it's sitting on a white surface. And notice how it's not like perfectly white. Like if you compare it to the white of the paper, it reads as white in the painting, but it's not like just white straight out of the tube to match the color of the paper. It had like a little bit of blue in it, a little tiny bit of black in it. So it almost was like a gray, but when I lay it into the painting, it feels like it's an object sitting on white. And that's not arbitrary. That's what I see in front of me, right? Everything is going to be affected by light and how light hits the white of the paper, how light casts shadows. And when I see this white in front of me, I don't see it as pure white. I see it as having a little bit of color in it. But you will notice in that part of the video when I start to lay in that lighter color, this is kind of the main point, I went off on a tangent there, how important it is to work with your background. Things really start to come together once I lay in that lighter tone and cover up a lot of that darker gray. You'll notice it's like a turning point in the painting in the video. So check that out. And the point of me talking about this is that your background is equally as important as your subject. A lot of beginner painters spend so much time struggling and working only within the subject itself and giving very little attention to the background. And then they're wondering why doesn't this feel like it has the same sense of light? Why is this looking wrong? It's because they're not paying attention to their background at all. They're neglecting it. But you'll see in the video how important that is to really bring this shape forward and really give it a sense of like this bright natural light around the object. So that is important. So like I said, the tape is optional, and even if you want to work against the white of the paper, that's optional too. Nothing in this video is something that you have to do. It's all just recommendations. It's how I work. It's how I find success with painting. So I do encourage you to try to get out of your old habits, try to get out of your particular comfort zone and try something different. But if there's any part of the video that you feel like, oh, I really just can't work that way, it makes me so uncomfortable, then don't. You know, it's all optional. It's all how you want to do it. So then next in the video, once I have my gray down, you'll notice that I begin sketching my subject using a line. Now in this video, I use a paintbrush with some paint on it to sketch out my subject. And that's just, again, personal preference. I paint all the time, so I feel very comfortable with a paintbrush in hand. I actually feel more comfortable sketching something out with a paintbrush versus a pencil. So that's another thing that's personal preference. I loosely laid in my proportions with my paintbrush. You'll notice I just simply used like a darker version of that gray that I had laid down to map it out with line. You'll also notice that as I develop the painting and start laying in color, I'm kind of like making corrections in the form as I go. But again, if you feel more comfortable using pencil to sketch your subject out, that's fine. You can even, if you want to try laying down the ground color first, if you let that dry, you can work with pencil right over that dry color just fine, and you should be able to erase over it just fine as well. So Again, a personal preference. If you feel more comfortable with a pencil in that step, that works too. Okay, and then once I have it all pretty much mapped out, you'll see that it's very roughly and crudely drawn in there. I do most of my developing of the form with the colors and with the values. But then once I start laying colors in, you'll notice I'm not that concerned with mixing colors. I feel like this is a good area to really see that. One of the things that I feel like beginning painters really struggle with is they have this need to make things so smooth, like smooth out the paint to the point where they're really obliterating all their color. Like I'll see students put in the right color to start, and then I'll come back around and they will have like just completely obliterated that color or that value because they were so concerned with blending it into that shadow and then blending that into that next light area and making it all so smooth that it eventually just becomes one color. So you might have this tendency. Really try to just find the colors, like mix the colors that you see and lay them in there next to each other. Like it was lighter there, so I laid that color down, and then it got a little bit darker, so I mixed up the correct color, and then I just laid it down and let it be. I didn't even blend between those two colors. And then I found the darker shade and I laid it in there, and then I found an even darker shade and I just laid it in there, and I did very little blending, yet it still reads like a curved form because I put the correct colors next to each other. You'll notice in the video also, anytime I do blend a few colors or two colors together, I use this technique that is called wet on wet technique. It's really hard to try to blend wet acrylic paint into dry acrylic paint. So anytime I do blend colors together, I make sure that both colors are wet. So you kind of have to work quickly when blending with acrylics because acrylics paints dry so fast. So what I usually do is go like work in small sections quickly. And when I want to blend two colors together, I make sure that both colors are wet, and then I intermingle them into one another while both colors are wet. So that's demonstrated in the video as well. So I think that's it for the tips I have for you. The rest of it is really just going to be trial and error, muddling through on your own. Don't be surprised if there are points where you feel really frustrated. Just keep going. That's so natural in painting. Just keep going. Maybe take a step away, take a breath, and revisit at another point, because it can get frustrating when things aren't coming out the way you want them to be. That's totally normal, but don't give up. Keep muddling through. Keep trying to mix those colors and values as accurately as you can. By this point, we've had a lot of experience with color mixing, so I feel like you're all very well equipped to do this assignment. And find your own way. You might find that you really like blending and you have success with that, and you like to smooth things out and you like that look. Find your own way that you like to do it. All of these things in this video are really just suggestions and tips and the way I personally approach things. Okay, enjoy.